Welcome back to Myth Mental Health. I am Justin A. Williams, author of Reborn Virtues Constellation. You can find that on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, wherever you can find books. Today, we're going to talk about longing, remorse, heartbreak in mythology. I think no mythology is probably more heartbreaking than Greek mythology. You have the story of Selene and Endymion. You have, maybe some people find that relationship between Zeus and Hera pretty heartbreaking. The Trojan War, the story of Orpheus is very famous. But there's heartbreak in other myths too, especially with the Japanese myths of the two Japanese creator gods. I think it's Izanagi and Izumi. There's plenty of stories in myth that are about not just losing a lover, but the tragedy of the result of the actions you take to maintain a relationship. You know, in life, what we try to do is salvage things that mean a lot to us. A lot of times those are things that we carry from the past, an old friend, an old relationship. Sometimes we try to hold on with dear life too long, and I think myth teaches us that not only do we have to let go, but if we are going to hold on, we're going to have to accept consequences and a status of the relationship that may not look like what we have initially imagined it to look like. So let's go into some of these stories I mentioned. The story of the two Japanese creator gods they were in love with each other, madly in love with each other, creating the world. And if you think about it, this is a lot like a relationship where you're creating your own reality around each other. You're creating sometimes your own good thought processes, and sometimes you're creating your own delusions about each other. People fall in love in an hour, people fall in love in a week. They say, oh, this is the one for me, right? But then one of them, the goddess, the creator goddess, dies, unfortunately, and she goes into the underworld. Now, bravery strikes the creator god. And when you think about the masculine disposition that a lot of influencers talk about and is here in myth, of course, he wants to get on his horse and just ride into the underworld and save her. However, he doesn't consider her status there. What has happened? What has changed? Is she the same person? And you may have a situation, I know I have in my own life. I've tried to be a white knight in many different forms in my life, but what you may not think is the person may have changed. So in life, when you have distance from someone, particularly in a romantic relationship where you two separate for a time, it's easy to have maybe drink a beer or sit down by yourself, contemplate, and think about, you know what? I need to get on the phone and call that person. I need to fly to London or wherever they are to tell them how I feel. You know, I need to do the John Cusack thing in, I think, this 80s movie where he goes to his girlfriend's house, he's sorry, trying to get her back, and he holds up a radio and plays their favorite song. It's very it's kind of very, I don't want to say selfish, but it's very self-minded way of thinking of heroism, right? That it's really just about you. It's not necessarily about what not only is effective for getting the person back, that's maybe a part of it, but really adjusting to where that other person is at, because when the god comes down to the underworld to save, I believe it's Izanagi, she is not what he expects. She's of the underworld, so she looks like someone who's been dead for a long time. And he's so horrified at first. He tries to kind of explain it away, his emotions, and compensate, but he can't. And she is so horrified by his reaction. She curses him and chases him. I believe she sends spirits after him, and he rides off, never to see her again. It's similar to the stories of other beings going to the underworld and not getting what they expect. So if you want to also look at the story of Selene and Endymion, right? Endymion, which, if you think about it, is a shepherd kind of person. There's a lot of connections between shepherd people, shepherd beings, and the moon, particularly in myth. Whether that's a relationship with the shepherd representing the solar deity or the shepherd representing the farmer that is resting during the moon's peak time. This is a time for romance. This is a time for deep connection and contemplation at night, however you want to see it. Endymion is going to die. He's immortal. And Selene is saddened by this. But you don't hear much in the story about how they fall in love, or if he even feels the same way for Selene. But Selene begs Zeus to give him immortality. But Zeus keeps a caveat. What he says is that he will not age, but he will be put in a state where he will not be awake. So he's asleep forever. You can think about what Selene's disposition would be to that, which is she can never communicate with him again. But she loves him, so even doting on him at night is enough. And this is, again, in this sadness moment, in this moment of deep, deep regret and remorse and longing, she makes a selfish decision. She has children with him. She lays upon him, has 50 daughters. And you don't hear anything about what his consent is. You don't hear anything about, and this happens a lot in myth, where female love is always seemingly required, not requited, but by the male force is accepted in some way. But male love is often rebuked. You can look at the story of Eos after she sleeps with Ares, and Aphrodite puts the touch of love on her, take that as you may, and Eos goes about sleeping with any man she can. You don't hear anything about any real men turning her down. In fact, I think it was Titanus, he's a Greek king or boy who she sleeps with so repeatedly that he begs her to stop. That's the only time, but you have to get to a heightened point for that. And I think what we see in that is different expectations for males and females when it comes to love and longing and sadness. That men are not really given the time of day in terms of how we can contemplate their sadness, contemplate their emotions, contemplate whether a man somehow just rejects a woman, even if it's a goddess. You think, why would he do that? But women are given much space for this. They're always talking about the tears of Aphrodite, right? When Adonis dies, the tears of Aphrodite create flowers, beautiful flowers. The tears of Eos, when her son, Memnon in the Trojan War dies, creates beautiful African flowers. Men are not afforded the same opportunity with their tears, and I find that very interesting. And I find that sets up something that we need to change. I think as men, we need to be able to look to myth to improve our mood. Sometimes when myth is not showing us this, we need to be anathema to myth. We need to find new stories and new myths that allow us to show our full emotional range. I know that a lot of influencers talk about how if you cry in front of a woman, they'll leave you, and even if they say they won't, and all that kind of crap. I believe that people will be honest if given the opportunity to, the space to safely do so, or they'll be honest when their backs are totally against the wall, right? If you really love someone and they're saying, I can either be myself with you or I'm gonna leave, they'll probably be honest with you. If you've been with someone for 50 years, 40 years, 20 years, they're probably at a state where they'll be honest with you. So what I think in wrapping this up and looking at the stories of sadness and myth and longing, I think we can deposit the story the same way that Coyote in many different Native American stories looks at life. Coyote creates death in one story, and in so doing, people don't understand why there needs to be death. But Coyote explains that there must be cycles. There must be an end. That you cannot subsist in togetherness forever or separation forever. That people come back in their cycle as new beings and in new forms. And if you want rebirth, if you want a new day in your life, if you want to change, not only do we need to let go, but we need to understand that if we don't let go, if we don't find, my dad always said, you know, when I got punished as a kid, if I punish you, I'll give you something, I'll replace it with something. And I know that might seem kind of stoic, but it's probably the biggest thing you can do. It doesn't mean you forget and you don't have moments years later where you lament the sadness of how things ended, but at least you're at a point where you didn't mutate it and transform it and transmogrify the relationship into something horrible and underworld-like, and almost where you're taking advantage of the other, of the situation. And like Celine, creating, if you really look deeply in the story, a twisted Snow White kind of story. So, you know, and just to say a little bit about myself in these videos, I studied myth and religion at Princeton University. I have been a lifelong lover of myth and religion. My dad used to play when I was a kid. Instead of me going and having play dates all the time, I listened to the Epic of Gilgamesh, or I listened to Joseph Campbell on video and tape. My goal here is obviously not to become some titan or an expert on myth. I think everybody can become an expert on anything, but my goal here with this channel is to really show you how in times where I've needed to improve my mental health, in improving my mood, improving my habits, improving my character, a lot of times I've just gone back to reading ancient myth and legend, from the stories of Homer to ancient Egypt to Zulu tribal myths and stories. And I picked YouTube for this domain because we need to get back to oral transmission. I think when people are face to face and being creative and in the moment, right? Like, I don't practice these videos. I try to go as much free form as I can because I want to enjoy what I'm doing. And I want you to sense that I enjoy telling these stories and sharing this information with you. And just to wrap up my main point today about loss, it's the pain and it's the tragedy that allows you to feel something that is very, very powerful, but you don't want to glorify negative emotions, no matter how much they may feel good. You want to listen to sad songs, right, to get over it, but eventually you want to listen to songs that are going to teach you about becoming a better person because you went through that thing. My mother, who's an author as well, she wrote a book called Death of the Good Girl. And in her book, she talks about, her name is Dr. Teresa Taylor Williams, and in her book, she talks about the destruction of her neighborhood to many different factors. And she's always been kind of upset about it until writing the book. And so her song for her life was a sad, sad song. And then she wrote her book, and now it's a song of experience, which is different than being a sad song. It's a song that is a rational way, an emotional way, a healthy way of putting things in perspective. So thank you today. And again, I'm an author of Reborn Virtues Constellation. You can get that anywhere. And like, share, subscribe for this channel. Help me grow and help me share the message of how myth, mental health, and myth can improve your mood. Thank you.